But
Oh yeah, I got a little recording notification.
yeah,
Um,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, now what you have to do is become awkward and uncomfortable now that it's recording.
mission accomplished because I'm pretty good at that. But yeah, so like I guess what I was like, the only comics I read like as a kid were like Calvin and Hobbes mostly, and Far Side, which is also great. I still love both of them.
I
And
read
then
Far Side and I loved Far Side, but it's like Calvin and Hobbes is kind of like a blind spot for me. Like I read like kind of collected books of like Garfield, like Dilbert even, which now we know is like, now is like we think of Dilbert way differently than we did in like 1998 or whatever. But
I I do have I was never a Dilbert guy, but I know people who were, and I was, and people whose like houses I would go to pretty frequently, and I did know people that had some of Scott Adams like philosophy books
oh,
before
interesting.
before the whole like before like Scott he just came
Right.
out as an insane racist dude.
Right, yeah.
Um
Yeah.
because I always go through people's bookshelves because I'm nosy like that and I love books. And you could read some of his books, and some of that stuff was out there if you knew where to find it. Like
Interesting. I
his
never
views have
saw
been out
any of
there for a
that.
while. Yeah,
Interesting.
he has some. I mean, we probably don't need to get too into it because it's weird, but he's got some weird books from a while back.
Huh.
Yeah, but I cannot believe you haven't read Calvin and Hobbes. It's phenomenal. You can
Yeah, that's a
absolutely
real
read them
blind
as an
spot
adult.
for me. I don't know why that
Oh,
is. It just was not, it's one of these things where it's like, I went to Borders as a kid and it just like it must have just not it must have been there and collected like trade paperbacks. It just must have not have interested me enough, I guess. But then
oh
why is
man.
Garfield, more
Yeah,
interesting?
how are you
Because it's like
reading
a
Garfield?
Garfield is good in my memory, but I don't know. It's not.
I actually can't comment. I've never read Garfield like ever.
I
So
mean, I'm not going to come out as like, okay, I'm the biggest Garfield defender because I have a very dim memory of what it even was. Like, this is like literally, I was probably 10 years old reading this, but
yeah.
I know everybody says like Calvin and Hobbes is really, really good. Every once in a while, I see a picture from it where it's like the art is obviously way superior to like Garfield. That is definitely just
No,
apparent just looking
he was
at it.
an excellent draftsman.
Yeah.
I think he started out as like a political cartoonist for a couple years. And I think he
Oh, huh.
had some formal art training. Like he's like a serious artist. I think all he does these days is like he just goes out and paints landscapes. Like the dude
Oh,
has like
interesting. He's still
he's
alive, even.
oh, he's still. I've been to the town he lives in. Like not to stalk him. I knew people that lived there. But it's a tiny little town in Ohio, and like there are scenes. Some of his Sunday strips are. It's very obvious he's painting the town he lives in.
Hmm.
Because like you can kind of look down the main street, and like if you were like me and you were like obsessed with Calvin Hobbes, like you're like, holy cow, like this is this is literally the Calvin and Hobbes town. um yeah, no, I love Calvin Hobbes. You have to read it. Like you can absolutely read them as an adult and enjoy them.
All
And
right,
the
you
art
sold
is
me.
great.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna have a giant omnibus of Calvin and Hobbes. I'm gonna read all of it.
It's I hope I'm not overselling it, but I mean I
No,
think
no,
it's
no.
well regarded enough that like you won't be disappointed.
I
um
mean, I have enough of like a knowledge of it from the outside that I know everything you're saying is true. That's like it's fairly commonly well known that it's good.
yeah.
I'm the one who's behind. Like everybody knows it's amazing. I'm just like I'm the one who missed out on it. But anyways, I'm here with here in spirit with Logan Stahl, who goes by like Lil Tachyon on a
Yeah,
lot of
Lil
sites.
Tachyon or some variation on that. It was a bad branding decision because no one ever knows how to spell it.
Huh.
But yeah,
I kind of like it because it's
Tachyon.
similar. I kind of like it because it's similar to like it's a similar vibe to like Moebius or there's I don't know if you know this guy like Alka Michael I've worked with in the
Yes,
past. Yeah, it's like kind of similar. It's
that
like kind
name
of
is immediately familiar. I'm googling that right now because who is this?
it's like
I
NL
absolutely
McDonald is
know
his
that
name, but
article.
yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah, oh, I love this guy's work. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah, he's
just pulled
great.
up his Instagram. Sorry, I like I got derailed. I knew the name. Yeah, this guy's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of like I'm saying there's kind of like a style of like, you have sort of like an artist's like almost like alter ego, I guess you could say. Like another guy that pops into my head is like this guy Dan Isles, like Dirty Robot. It's like kind of similar. It's like people know him as like Dirty Robot, but like it's kind of similar to Moebius, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually kind of like embarrassingly, it was kind of a persona decision for me because when I first started posting stuff online, it was not just drawings. I did post like some music experiments, and you can
Oh,
find a
interesting.
rap from me online.
Okay, so
I
it's
will
like
not tell
the
anyone where to
Lil
find it.
the Lil Tachyon is
That is
like a
the
little
Lil
bit like,
Tachyon
oh,
origin.
I
It
gotcha.
was like in case I wanted to pivot to doing more music, and I liked the dumb sci-fi name. There is a rap you can find for me. I will not give a link to it, but it can be found if you search.
No, listen, I mean, there's plenty of stuff that I've written that I'm not shouting from the rooftops, just
Yeah.
trying to tell people about. But that's kind of an interesting segue though, because it's like, when would you say that was roughly when you started like posting art online? Like what year, I guess?
Oh man. I originally started posting art online on like DeviantArt in like 2011.
I
I was in
gotcha.
I was in high school. Like I had been online from a very young age, but I never posted stuff. So I posted on there, and then sometime in like 2015 ish, I just kind of tanked every social media I had for a few years, and I didn't start really posting. Like I had stopped mostly drawing by the end of high school. Like I had just kind of plateaued, and then I started teaching myself again in like 2015 ish, and by 2017 I like knew some other people that were drawing that I really liked their stuff, and I was like, all right, maybe I should post stuff again. So like 2017 ish is when I made like a Tumblr account and I started drawing on there. So you can find stuff from when I was in high school on like some different stuff, but 2017ish, I think I was 20 something, and then I started posting. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Like what kind of like I don't know if this was actually recorded in the pod, but like we were just talking about how like you weren't a big comic book guy growing up. Like what would you say like is sort of your history with that? Like you were into Calvin and Hobbes, which is more like, would you say Calvin's Hobbes is like kind of like a comic strip, I guess you'd say?
Yeah,
Like it's,
it was like a weekly comic strip.
yeah.
I mean, even it was. I mean, by the time I was reading, I think it ended the year I was born. So
Oh,
like,
interesting.
by the time I was
So
reading
now
it,
I
it
could
was.
reverse engineer exactly how old you are
Yeah,
and
you
judge
if you
you
want
based
to,
on
that's
that.
one of those things. Like you can figure out how old I am if you want to.
Right, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I will often give like online give kind of I don't tell people my birthday, but I will give very specific touchstones in my life. But yeah, by the time I was engaging with Calvin and Hobbes, that was already in like collections that like kids at school would lend me or I would get from the library. But like I think the first time I read, I'm sure I've found some comics here and there as a kid, but the first time I read a that I can remember reading a comic book was surprisingly like it was probably eighth grade. Uh, one a kid I was friends with in middle school, she lent me a copy of Watchmen.
Oh,
Um, yeah, which and I was
who
like, I
watches
was
them?
who watches the Watchmen? That was so my first interaction with a superhero comic was Watchmen, and then I could never read another superhero comic
Huh.
because Watchmen is too darn good.
Yeah, kind of like inoculated you against it.
Yeah, but I to this day I absolutely love it. I just reread it this
Yeah.
year. It's
Yeah, I mean
freaking
it's
phenomenal.
it's almost like cliche to say, but it is so good. It's
Oh, I yeah, no,
it's just
I
like,
know it's and that's the thing with like if you were to ask me like books I read, I can give you some weird out there stuff. Like for comics, it's like it's super basic. Like I loved watching when I read it. Actually, I think I went through a little bit of an Alan Moore phase after that, where I read V for Vendetta and like
huh.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Like I had a brief like I'm into comics for a little bit. Um, And then yeah, there was some other stuff I read in high school. Like if people would lend me a comic book, I would read it. Like I think I read like one of my buddies got really into comic books for like a little bit before it got too expensive for him. And so like he would give me like I remember reading like Batman Year One. I actually really
Hmm.
liked. That was a
Yeah.
good one.
These are
Like
all pretty good recommendations just for people like if anyone's listening to this and you don't even know where to start with comic books, like I would say, this is good stuff, I would say.
yeah, I would a lot of the stuff I read I did enjoy. Like I read like I feel like there's a surprisingly good amount of Batman comics. Like I'm not particularly interested in Batman as a character, but like I liked Batman Year One. I like Killing Joke. I like
Hmm.
Dark Knight. What's the Frank Miller Dark Knight
Dark
one?
Knight
Is that
Returns.
Dark Knight Returns? I mean, so I should say I read these all in high school, which is like well over 10 years ago now. So I don't know if they hold up, but I
They
really
hold
liked
up.
them then.
Everything you've named
Yeah.
so far holds up big time, in my
but
opinion.
I would read stuff if people lent them to me, but then like I could it was there were also like tons of like there were plenty of stuff that people gave me where I was like, wow, this is terrible. Like I
Huh.
remember I have never read a Marvel comic I enjoyed. I've never read a Marvel comic that I finished. Like I would be like, wow, this is really bad. Um, maybe I'll read Frank Miller's
What
Daredevil
about
because
Moebius Silver Surfer with
I
Stan Lee?
I don't yeah it's um
I've
a
never
lot of
even
it was
read that actually, but I
yeah
just know.
I've never read it either. That is a good point. I might try that. A lot of Moebius comics are not good. I I
Whoa,
say this as a huge Moebius fan. The writing is terrible. I
interesting.
have a
Like, what are we
decent
talking about here? Like, what would you say specifically?
so probably in college is when I discovered Moebius. So like a little bit later. And I've read a good amount of his stuff. Like the Ink Owl is probably the best one, and my memory of it, it's pretty engaging
Okay, and
for
that's
like
a
maybe
that's a Jodorowsky written
yeah
one. Like, technically, that's not like a
yeah
Moebius like
it's
writing
not
thing.
his writing. The stuff he actually writes is usually garbage.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna say it, and so is Jodorowsky, but he keeps you entertained for like 2/3 of that book, and then
Right.
it just kind of falls apart in the end. The only Moebius comic I remember thinking was kind of well written was The Long Tomorrow, which is a short one.
Oh yeah. I mean, that is
Yeah.
the Long Tomorrow. Like for people who don't know, is like I'm pretty sure it appeared in Heavy Metal. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's like an
Yeah.
old heavy metal comic.
It was. I think it was written by Dan O'Bannon. Right? I mean, am I messing this up already? But
I can fact check you
yeah, I was actually looking it
in
up
real
too.
time. Jamie, pull
But
up that's the one podcast joke I know. I don't even listen to
yeah,
Joe Rogan.
Jamie, pull up Dan O'Bannon. I wish that would be on Rogan that he would talk about comic books, but
Oh wow, you're
instead of
good. Yeah, that
dumb
was Dan
bullshit.
O'Bannon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Dan O'Bannon, who
you're a
wrote
true comics
Alien.
guy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I happen to be like I've done comic book pitches that are more like cyberpunkish, so you
Mhm.
sort of have to read that. But
Oh, that's a touchstone. Yeah.
yeah, The Long Tomorrow, again, I'm way off track, but for people who don't know who are listening to this, it's sort of like it was like a short comic book that appeared in Heavy Metal, which again, if you don't read comic books, you don't know, is sort of like a French, comic book anthology magazine.
Yeah.
And basically it had art by Moebius and it was written by this guy Dan O'Bannon, who went on to write Alien, and he was a big time like visual effects guy. Um, and it basically was like Blade Runner before Blade Runner. It was like Moebius kind of invented Blade Runner, that sort of like flying car, dirty cyberpunk world, also sort of like a detective, like in this futuristic world, like, and then, it's almost pretty blatantly like Ridley Scott just like made the movie version of that with Blade Runner. So it had
Yeah,
a huge impact on culture, just this little comic book.
it's kind of crazy because I mean, now that I have the page open for it, it's from 1976. That story,
Yeah.
and
Looks like
like
it
how
could
many
be
things came
made
out of it.
today.
Yeah, like it's like there's so much like cyberpunk stuff that traces its like direct lineage, like
Right.
aesthetically at least, to that story. And then I'm remembering this now. Like somebody found like there's like I think this is in Long Tomorrow. There's like one panel with like a little floating robot with all
Yes,
these
that they
spidery
used in
arms,
Star
and
Wars,
it's
right?
literally the probe droid. Like they just ripped
Yes.
that off in Empire Strikes
Yes.
Back. It's like
That kind of
that
drives
design.
me crazy a little bit. I feel like Moebius should have been paid for that, but especially since it's
So many people were pulling from him for so many years, like just kind of like without giving him any credit, which is really funny.
right. Yeah. I mean,
It's definitely not good, but yeah.
Blade Runner is literally like take some of those panels from The Long Tomorrow, and it's like they adapted it almost. It's like, it looks like it's straight out of The Long Tomorrow, but on the other hand, you're allowed to have your influences and stuff. So I'm not saying like, oh, Blade Runner is derivative. Like it's not derivative, you're allowed to be influenced by Moebius, so it's totally fair game. But you know,
Mhm.
it's just is a little frustrating that it's like, no one even knows who he is practically in the larger
It's
population.
one of those things where like if you're a weird nerd, every time you see a Mobius inspired thing, you will recognize it immediately. Uh, and regular people just won't.
Right, yeah.
It's like I have that experience all the time.
Actually, now that I'm
Um,
thinking about it, I remember in Blade Runner 2049, the main guy, like the Ryan Gosling character, like his apartment has like a big Japanese writing, like it has a big sign that's like Japanese, and
mhm.
it actually says Mobius, like in Japanese.
Oh, that's
So it's
really
kind of
funny.
cool, a little bit. Like they are aware of the idea that there's a lineage there.
You know, I actually haven't seen either of the Blade Runner movies, but
Oh,
I've seen no movies.
wow.
I've seen no movies, read no I should I should give you I can finish up my little experience with comics real quick because that might give you context for like how much I
Sure,
know
sure.
about comics. So I think like yeah, in college I found a lot of Mobius stuff. And like the couple I was except for a couple exceptions, most superhero comics turned me off. And like I would find weird stuff through the internet as like a teenager. Like I found out about like have you ever heard of Xenozoic?
I've heard of it, but I'm not super
Oh, no one's
familiar.
ever read it. No one's ever read it. It's so good. It was adapted into a cartoon that more people know called like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which I haven't seen. But it's like it's this comic book that takes place in like some far future like post-nuclear war where like now there's dinosaurs and stuff
Hmm.
and people drive around in sports cars and it sounds so stupid. Um but it's surprisingly incredibly good. Like the guy who wrote and illustrated it, like Mark Schultz, is like an incredible draftsman, and he never like he was able to write these really good stories without ever taking it too seriously. Like it's these very pulpy, well written stories, and it's really good. And if you can ever track it down, it's well worth reading. That's like my favorite comic that I recommend everybody. But yeah, I only know this like kind of weird stuff, and then like weird stuff or super basic stuff like I really like Akira and Nausicaa, and like Watchmen. Like it's like big touchstones and then like random stuff that I have either found or people have recommended to me. And all of Simon Roy's comics are great, and that's
Huh.
about all I know about comics.
That's interesting though. So you've read like the Simon like how do you even find Simon Roy? You know what I mean? Is
I
it just
was
like
I was big. So like I was very online from a very young age, and I found him absolutely when I was in middle school.
interesting?
I mean, if on the off chance Simon is listening to this, I've told him this a bunch of times. Like I found his like he did this thing called like Dinosauroids probably when I was like 12 or 13,
Oh yeah.
where it was like this like alternate history thing where like dinosaurs became sentient and formed like feudal societies or something, and it was awesome. And so I was kind of aware of him from a really young age, and then I only ended up picking up a lot of his comics like in the last couple of years. I would like if I had a couple like for birthdays or Christmases, or if I had a couple bucks, I would pick up the Simon Roy comic, and I've been reading through the backlog. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what order these podcast episodes are going to come out, but I talked to Simon for a while, and it's just so interesting. It's just like these comic books, like you make them and you just, you have no concept that like some kid in middle school is going to be like profoundly influenced by this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of what I but like the a crazy thing for me was, so his comic that came out, I guess the physical copies came out in like May. He did a comic called Grizz Grobus, and I got to
Yes.
do a little pinup in the back of it, and that was like everything coming full circle for me. It was very cool for
Yeah.
me.
That's a great book too. I
Yeah.
mean, I said this on the
Oh
interview
yeah,
with
highly
him that,
recommend.
yeah, I mean, that to me is up there as one of the best of these Kickstarter comic books, especially just like, just not even talking about like the book itself and like the quality of the art and like the storytelling or whatever. Like the actual physical product of that is just like, it's a beautiful thing. It's like
It's so nice.
this like bound book with like gold leaf, like lined pages. It's just like next level production quality, in my opinion. Um, I always have to say in my opinion, like I'm like allegedly, like my joke is like,
Supposedly.
yeah, like my joke is sort of like I should make a podcast that's just called allegedly, and it's just like constantly saying irresponsible, just crazy shit, but then just being like allegedly, like making it clear I have no responsibility for what I'm saying.
That's the kind of thing where it's like it becomes funnier, like the wider audience you have, like the more people are being impacted by it and the more irresponsible things you are saying, like that's it's like the more horrible it is, the funnier that idea becomes.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. We live in such a crazy world now, where like so many podcasts are just. It's like it's crazy to me. It's like Joe Rogan has such an influence on like American like politics and stuff. This guy is just like a fucking idiot. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, I've
He-
listened like one. I've only listened to like one of his podcasts like ever because somebody sent it to me, and I was like, I'll try this out. This is kind of before, maybe he was big then. And I was just living under a rock. I hadn't really heard of him. But like I listened to the podcast, and he has some guy on that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna live to be 200 years old. And I had to listen to like an hour and a half of this, and then I
yeah,
texted
yeah.
the guy back like, oh cool, informative. And then, like I never listened to another Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, yeah. You just have to be nice or whatever. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's rough for like, he's basically on there he's now is just like it's insane like propaganda essentially. Just like he'll be on there being like, yeah, I don't know, climate change sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. It's like, geez,
uh,
like how did it become this?
yeah,
I thought you were like
jury's still out.
I thought you were like stoner hippie comedian guy, and now you're like expounding on the vaccine and stuff. Like go back to talking about like Bigfoot or something. Like that's more your speed.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I
Anyways,
cannot completely condemn him because, as a New Jersey chauvinist, I have to
no,
respect everyone from New
now it
Jersey.
comes out.
That makes it big.
You're bought and paid for by big Rogan
Yeah,
industry.
big Rogan industry. Nah, I just am very, very from New Jersey.
Yeah, no, I hear
Yeah, and to be clear, it's a joke. I don't support Joe Rogan, but
you.
the part about me being from New
I'm
Jersey
gonna
is serious.
I'm gonna chop this podcast up. I'm just gonna post that. I'm just gonna post a highly edited clip, and I'm just gonna spread it all over X. I wanted to
Yeah,
say
please
Twitter,
do. No,
but
nobody goes on X anymore anyway, so it won't even have any traction.
so it's interesting though. You're not like a huge comic book guy, and even Moebius. It's all like, have you read? Like I'm not a big Moebius guy in terms of like having read everything he's done because it's like, it's hard to even like get his stuff really. Like you got to eBay
Yeah,
it. Like
yeah.
it's and
It
like
is.
I think you've said before, like obviously I'll edit this out if you don't want like people to know this or whatever, but like you've said before, like isn't your wife speaks French or something? So
Yes,
you
she does, and she cares for me very much, and she'll usually get me a Mobius comic on my birthday. And a lot of the time, you have to get them from France. So like, I have a bunch of like French, versions of Mobius comics because I think some of them just aren't in English.
right. Or
Um,
they're like, okay, pay $80 an issue. to get it.
Yeah, it's expensive. So like I've acquired them over years. Like it's not
Yeah,
like I wouldn't recommend anybody go out and just buy all his stuff. I also
right.
feel
Because you're
like
going
for
to be
some
spending
context,
like
because
hundreds
I
and
was
hundreds of
dumping
dollars.
on Moebius earlier. I just there is a reason I have a lot of his books. It's like I don't think the stories are great, but the art is impeccable. You read them for the art.
Yeah,
It's
definitely. I mean,
gorgeous. Yeah.
I haven't read that much Moebius stuff. The main thing is like, because I do this book called Holy West, like one of the things to prepare for that is I got one thing of like Blueberry. Of course, he's done this is just one
Oh
like
yeah, he's done like a
collected thing.
million of them.
Yeah, he's done millions and millions, but so this is like something like I don't even know. It's probably like 50 pages total. He's probably done 500 as far as I know of like the whole thing, but um I was really struck by in Blueberry, like it's beautiful art, right? Of like the old
Mhm.
West, but it's like covered in like massive word balloons, like every panel, like filled with word balloons. And it's like, I'm not gonna read this. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm a big reader too. Like, I read like a lot of books. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just not gonna like, I'm not getting a Moebius book to be like just blasted with like walls of text. Like,
Oh yeah, you want to see that. You want to see his art.
yeah,
I
man,
actually I haven't read any of the Blueberry. I've read a lot of his sci-fi and fantasy stuff. I haven't read Blueberry, but I've never heard any praise for it that included the writing. It's
right.
always, or like ever credited like a writer on it. It's just
I
always
mean,
like Mobius's drawings in Blueberry are beautiful, and like that's it.
it might be good as far as I know, but it just like it really clarified for me that like, when it comes to comic books, um, I just don't want to see like it has to tell a story visually. I don't want to have every single page be like filled with text. Like, I do want there to be some text, like, but just not every single panel, every page, like there has to be you have to dole it out where it's appropriate, I guess. I also read, like I've been getting issues of Airtight Garage,
Mhm.
and that's all Mobius, right? That's just him writing it.
I
Um,
think so. I actually haven't read that one. I know of it, but I haven't read any of Airtight Garage.
that one is interesting because unless I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure he's doing it like kind of, I don't know if like Little Nemo. I think he's
Oh yeah,
doing it.
I've actually read a decent amount of Little Nemo.
Well, Little Nemo is interesting because, again, if people don't know, this is like a French comic book strip that's like highly
No, no,
influential. Like,
Little Nemo is American.
oh, is it? I thought.
Yeah, it's by
Are
Winsor
you sure
McKay.
about that?
Yeah,
Are you calling me out of my own podcast here? I'm gonna
I am
double
calling
check
you.
this.
Winsor McKay. He also did like the first cartoon, like animated cartoon.
Son of a gun! It's not
Yeah.
French.
No,
You're
no, he
right.
was just a huge
I
influence on a
thought it
lot
was
of
French for
people.
some reason. Yeah, it's just a huge influence on Mobius. You're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you can see it.
I've read a decent amount of Little Nemo because in a cool my local library has a surprisingly good comic collection. And one time I was just walking through and they have this giant all of Little Nemo like in one massive
Hmm.
tome. And that's another one where it's beautiful. It does get tedious after a while
Right,
because
because just
it's
like the same one page idea
kind of, yeah,
over
yeah.
and over again.
There are like arcs. It's weird because it's like
There are, yeah, it does have the storylines.
it's from like 1906 or something. So it's like it's very old, and it's not really like that. You can't really describe it in a way that really fits modern comic books or even like syndicated comic strips. Like it doesn't have
Right.
any of that same kind of format. It's fun to read, but it gets tedious after a while. But very beautiful comic book.
Yeah, for people who don't know, basically the premise of it is it's about like a little kid who he falls asleep, and it's like a one-page comic book strip. I think it was printed in newspapers. So it would just be like one page, and it's like surreal imagery of like what's going on in his dreams. And then sort of the gag of it is that he always kind of wakes up at like the bottom right corner of the page. And
Hmm.
like Logan is saying, like there's kind of storylines in the sense that like not always, but there would be like arcs, right? That it would be like, okay, now he's in the kingdom of Morpheus, like in Slumberland, and it would be like continuing story from week to week, but each page would end with him waking up at the end of the thing. So that was sort of the gag of it, that it was like his surreal dreams.
Hmm.
Um, and I've read a fair amount of this just like because it's like I believe it's now just like public domain. So you could just totally just read this online for free.
Hmm.
So without breaking any laws, allegedly you could read it for free.
Yeah, I mean
And
it's over 100 years old now. I'm sure it's
yeah,
public
yeah, yeah.
domain.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely public domain. And there's also stuff in there like that's like, I don't know, fucked up by today's
Oh
standards. Like
yeah,
I think you could say
there's some
it's
very bad
yeah, there's like
racial
racist stuff.
caricatures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's very weird how often it's so old that there's like so one of the main characters is like I could tell it was supposed to be racist against something, but I literally couldn't tell what. And
Right.
it's supposed to be an
It's like
Irishman, and I
obscure
was like,
racist. It's
I'm
supposed to
like,
be
what?
Irish. Interesting.
Yeah,
So
it's a
crazy.
weird comic.
It's good though. I mean, it's highly influential. It's
Yeah,
like
visually it's impeccable.
it
He was ahead
arguably
of his
kind of
time.
shaped modern comics a little bit. I'm sure we could list dozens and dozens of people who were like influenced by it, including like Moebius or whatever. But his book, his comic Airtight Garage was kind of like that. That it would be like 2 pages that was meant to go in heavy metal that month or whatever. And then it's like he's doing it 2 pages at a time. So I don't think he had any sort of like, it's not like he had like a big whiteboard where it was all planned out. He was just like
Hmm.
doing whatever he felt like doing for those 2 pages. And, sort of like has like a surreal, dreamlike quality because he's just sort of like going wherever, it takes him, so, but I would recommend that though, because it's like you're saying, like if you just want like the Mobius art, like it's great for that because it's like just going to be Mobius art. It's him doing whatever he wants to do. It's almost like him. It's almost like you're reading like Mobius's dreams. You know what I mean? Because he's just like
Hmm.
he's got to get those 2 pages out, and he's just doing them. You know what I mean? He's not like um consciously overthinking it or whatever. He's just like doing the 2 pages and then he's got to get on to the next thing. It's sort of like that being forced to get it out sort of like I don't know creates like a weird flow, I guess.
Hmm.
He doesn't have time to be like I'm going to methodically make my master plan, it's going to be my magnum opus, like you know what I'm saying, like he's just doing the pages and it has sort of an organic quality to it.
Yeah, that's probably when he Mobius is at his best on shorter stories or just kind of stream of consciousness stuff like that. Because then you can really just let the art take over, and your brain will fill in a story, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean I'm just kind of surprised that no one is really, I guess there's a million things like this, but I'm kind of surprised no one's tried to like adapt this or anything like that. Anyways, so you were not like a huge comic book guy. So like Mobius, you'd say was like a big influence. Like what else? Like, do you feel like I'm kind of surprised to hear you haven't seen Blade Runner because I would have assumed that would be a big Lil Tachyon type thing. But
At some point, I will have to watch it. I don't watch a lot of movies, because like when I'm hanging out with other people, nobody wants to watch some weird sci-fi movie from the
yeah, for
70s.
sure.
And when I'm by myself, I don't watch movies. I don't know why. I just rarely do, unless I'm like sick, and then I'm like, all right, nobody can come near me anyway, and I'm too tired to read, so I'll put a movie on. But most of the time, I just if I'm just hanging out, I will just read a book. I read a lot of different. I read novels, short stories, the histories, anything. I'll read a lot of books.
Okay,
But
what would you say
yeah.
are like the kind of books that sort of like influence like influence like your sort of like sci-fi-ish art, you know what I mean? Like what are the things that are like the big mind blowers for you?
Oh man, I mean, the big one that like specifically to this day is kind of like like a really great like sci-fi big epic space opera book is Hyperion by Dan Simmons.
Interesting.
And he's I say this knowing that Dan Simmons is like a garbage person now, but that book is great.
Oh, really? I don't
And
know. Like, I'm not. I haven't read this. I mean, I think we've talked about Hyperion before. Like, I haven't read it. I don't know anything about Dan
Oh,
Simmons.
oh, Hyperion's so
Allegedly, I
good.
disavow everything that he said. I don't.
Yeah, we don't need to get into Dan Simmons, but Hyperion is great. It's like it's kind of the way I would describe it. It's like so the whole framing narrative is like there's like this group of like I want to say like 7 or 8 people are all on a spaceship and they're going to this planet called Hyperion. And they all tell the story of how they got on this ship and why they're going there. Um, and so each story is kind of like what's cool about each story is like each one is kind of like a send up to different genres of 20th century sci-fi. Like
Hmm.
there's like a faux HP Lovecraft story, there's like a cyberpunk story, there's like a military sci-fi story. Like they're all different, and then they're all united by this like very cool framing narrative that gets resolved in the second book. It's like if you just want to read like a really fun sci-fi book that is long but totally holds your attention, I totally recommend it. Like everyone I've told to read it has liked it, which normally does not happen with books I recommend because I read a lot of weird stuff. But Hyperion's super fun, and that is where I got my username from because I like
Oh,
yeah, the intro, like the intro sentence of Hyperion. Like I remember reading it. It's something like, oh, like the tachyons were like flowing into this like communicator on the guy's spaceship on like a
huh.
swamp planet or something. I'm butchering it. It sounds way better in the actual book, but that was like that was what I first heard the word tachyon. So
Huh.
to be fair, I probably heard it in a Death Grip song before then, but I didn't know what it was. So yeah.
I still don't know. Like, what is a tachyon? It's like a hypothetical
Um,
particle?
yeah, it was like this thing. I think it's like potentially under like special relativity. It's like a thing that could exist. Like like
Right.
the idea that like you can't ex-
Hypothetical particle.
yeah, like you can't accelerate something faster than light,
Right.
but hypothetically something could exist that's already faster than light.
Hmm.
And they're pretty sure there's no evidence for them, like they would have
Right.
been able to detect it, but it was a cool idea. It's like it's just a neat, and it shows up in a lot of old sci-fi. So that's kind of yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm reading a little bit about it now, I'm seeing like, yeah, I mean, there's the whole idea that they could go backwards in time, I guess. So I'm
Hmm.
recognizing this now from different sci-fi stuff, like you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. If you read a lot of like 20th century sci-fi, like you will hear references made to it. Not so much anymore, but that's I read like a lot of between like I don't know. I grew up reading lots of sci-fi, like, and I kind of started with like when I was a kid, I would read like Jules Verne books and H.G. Wells, and I would kind of make
Oh,
my way
interesting.
through the decades. And
So
I don't know,
you
to this
you like
day,
kind of like more of like 1970. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like 1970s, kind of like pulpy sci-fi. I mean, would you say that's
yes,
right?
70s stuff is kind of like, oh, that's what I love. Like
I love
60s,
those
70s,
like I'll
80s.
sometimes look through those book covers and just like they knew how to make book covers back then. Like
Oh
with just like
yeah,
the cool art, the like the colors, like you know.
yeah. It's a lot. If you the there's just like I try to buy a lot of books used because it's cheaper, but also like if you're reading sci-fi, like the older covers are better.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
are starting to. I think people are realizing that because it's getting harder and harder to find the used sci-fi books for cheaper. Like you're better off buying a new one, and it's very frustrating. But yeah, I like a lot of that. I love like Ursula Le Guin.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like yeah, I read a lot of novels. I'm a big I've been reading a ton of John Crowley. He's great, like sci-fi fantasy guy. um like I read other stuff, but I've always like loved genre fiction. Like if I'm gonna read something for fun, it's gonna be
Right.
some
Give
kind of
me give me some
yeah.
spaceships. Give me some robots.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's like if I want to have a good time and just relax, that is what I will read.
are you a big Dune guy? Like, have you read those
Oh, I
books?
love Dune.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I have not read all of them. I've read the first one a couple times. I read Messiah. I thought it was really good. I read Children of Dune so I could read God Emperor because I heard God Emperor was good. and Children of Doom was terrible, and I haven't gotten around to God Emperor, but I'll
Oh,
read it at
interesting.
some point.
You got to read God Emperor. I really, I really actually like Children of Dune a lot. I like basically I feel Dune, uh Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and God Emperor of Dune. Those are basically the ones I would just even say like there. I think there's three more, but you don't need to you don't need to read like Heretics of Dune. You don't need to read
Yeah,
Chapter House Dune. You don't need to
yeah.
read them.
I,
No
I
offense,
just
Frank
wanted to
Herbert.
read God Emperor because I heard it was like as good as the original, so I should get around to it. I have a copy of it.
I think in some ways it may be the best one. I mean, that may
Yeah,
be
people say that,
sacrilege to say
which
that,
is
but
wild. No, a lot of people say that, which is why eventually I will read it. Next time I want to sit down and read a really big sci-fi book, it'll probably be God Emperor.
so how do you? I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before the recording started, but like, how do you feel about like this Dune movie, like overall? I know we have only seen the first part so far, so it's not totally
I
fair to judge it, but
it's how do I want to put this? Like it's well, I mean, like I told you earlier, like it's a movie I would only see in theaters because it feels it's a big spectacle and they do that really well and it's cool to see on a big screen. But I just don't think it has the weirdness of Dune, or at least how I imagined Dune in my head.
yeah,
Um,
it
it's not
feels
it's
very
not a
like
bad
it's like
adaptation. Yeah.
it feels very much like the aesthetic of it is like like an iPhone or something. Like it feels like very sleek, like
Yeah. Yeah, it's
like
too
things are
it's yeah.
gray and things are brushed steel and they're they're like I don't know, they're sandblasted steel and like things are black and gray like you know you
It's
were
yeah, it's
saying
a
before the
lot of
pod
grays,
started,
browns. It looks like
right?
ah man, it looks like old Call of Duty games kind of. Like there was some cool stuff. I liked people listening to this have seen Dune or have read it, so I don't
For
care about
sure, yeah. We're
spoilers.
we're
Like
just gonna
the
assume like
yeah,
if you don't want to hear Dune spoilers, then go fuck yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah,
Then
no,
skip
for
ahead
real.
of this,
That's
but
the attitude I have unironically. But like the I remember like from the new Dune movie, there's like a scene where they go to like the Sudarker like prison planet and they're all
yeah,
beating on drums in the rain and like that
right.
was
That's
sick.
just
That was
totally
cool.
not even in the book, right? I'm pretty
No, and
sure.
that was like a cool thing they added.
Yeah,
But yeah, I feel like overall it was a decent adaptation. Like my main qualms were with the visuals didn't live up to what
right.
I would have liked to see, and that's I'm a very visual person, so like I
Yeah,
mean that makes
definitely.
sense. And I thought,
I mean, it's a visual medium too, the movie.
yeah,
So
yeah, it
like,
should be more fun. Give it color.
yeah, I mean, we were just talking about before the pod started. Like, I honestly would be like, you know, have Artyom Trakhanoff design it, have Goran Gligovich design it, even have
Yeah,
you like
yeah,
do like design
have
like
all of us on there and pay us like $400,000 each.
like right, yeah, right, exactly. Like it's
So,
like
so like
and
don't
by
have
the
to work
way,
for 5 years.
yeah, and by the way, that's probably like a low number for like the actual people who work. Like you're saving money. Like you're
Yeah,
probably
yeah. Whoever made the Dune movie, I will work for slightly less than
yeah,
whatever
like
artists you have, and I will do a better job.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
they should. I mean, I don't know. This sounds terrible now. What I'm saying, I'm basically saying like you should hire comic book artists and pay them less than the people you currently like. I want to walk that back a little bit, but I'm saying like it's like if I try to think like try to picture in your head one spaceship from the Dune movie. Like I'm struggling to do it. Like you know what I mean? Like there's
they
not
did the one I remember from the movie was like there was some weird circular kind of
right.
like tubular
I think
wormhole ship or something, and that
yeah,
one
I
was
think that was
cool.
implied to be like if you look at that closely, I think that's implied to be like a wormhole, like you're saying,
Yeah, and that was the only cool ship.
But
Um,
even then, it's just like super minimalist. Like there's not. It's just a circle. Like there's not. It's like
it's frustrating because you can go back and you can see the concept art for like the aborted 70s movie. Like
right.
you
The
know what I'm do you know what I'm talking
Moebius,
about?
Jodorowsky,
Yeah,
Dune.
yeah. I
Yeah. Like
mean,
I'm
for
actually like
context, yeah, for the listeners, like back in like the 60s or 70s, they tried to make a Dune movie, and they had like Moebius, Chris Foss,
that
H.R.
guy Dan
Geiger.
O'Bannon I mentioned.
Oh, was Dan O'Bannon on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He
Oh
was gonna
wow,
do the
and
special effects. Yeah.
Oh wow. And Ron Cobb I think even did concept art for it.
Yeah,
You can find drawings for it. It looks amazing. And I mean, obviously you see it and you're like hoping for something that never came to be. So in your head it's always going to be better. But it's still, the designs are still more distinctive than anything that came out in the new Dune movie. So that's
definitely. I
my
mean,
biggest complaint with the Dune movie. Also, I thought Timothy Chalamet was bad for Paul Atreides.
I
Um,
thought he was good, and I thought he was fine, to be honest with you. And he's believably like, even though I don't know how old he is when he was filming that, he's probably was like 25 or older, but he's like, you could believe that he's like 15. So, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like he's
it wasn't maybe, so maybe I should reframe my state. I think how, and maybe this wasn't his fault. I don't know who was, maybe it was something to do with the direction or the writing, but I felt like they kind of made him this dour, sulky kid, which is in
hmm,
the book, but like they missed out on all those kind of scenes where he's like buddying up with like Gurney and Duncan, Idaho, that I thought was a really nice, like the kid has like friendships, and that's what makes it hurt all the more when like all his friends and family get killed. And I felt
right,
like
yeah.
that was missing from the movie a little bit. That was the only other. I'm going back like 2 years now to like criticize the Doom movie that I
No,
saw
I think
once.
it's listen, this is like the meat and potatoes of the pod here. This is like the interesting stuff, you know. I'm
Yeah,
like a huge fan of that like Hodorowski's Dune documentary. I don't know if you've seen that, but like
I
that
want to
gets it.
watch it, but it's another one of those like who can I get to watch this with me, and nobody
It's
will. But
really
I do
good.
want to watch it.
I would recommend it. I mean, it's this whole complicated thing now where like Hodorowski, I feel, is like a controversial figure because he said stuff that makes me uh less happy to like publicly announce that I like him and I liked, Hodorowski's Dune or whatever. You know what I mean? He said
Hmm.
like, in Hodorowski's Dune, he has a whole thing where he like says like, oh, like, when you adapt a novel, like you have to rape it, like you have to like rape the novel. Like he's like, it's like
Oh man, use
he's
any other word, bud.
yeah, he has like a boomer brain where he doesn't realize like, you can't, maybe not smart to talk that way, or not even that it's not smart, but just like don't talk that way. Like
Just don't
have
do
more awareness. Like, like I get that he's probably trying to be provocative and controversial, but you know, you're not doing yourself any favors. But that like
yeah, I'm not super familiar with him, but I've heard that he's kind of a weirdo in that way, where it's not
he
like endearing, it's like
yeah, I mean,
off-putting.
he's a weirdo, but like I do say, he's made good movies. He gave a pretty good shot at making Dune. I don't think that he's totally like I don't think he's like, I don't think he's like the Joe Rogans of this world or whatever, who I feel totally confident just writing off Joe Rogan as like a jerk and a bad guy or whatever. But I'm just saying, like because he makes these like foot in his mouth, like wildly inappropriate comments, I feel less comfortable tweeting like, "Hey, like I love Hodorowski's Dune," like, and then people will be like, "Have you seen he said this?" And I'll have to say, "Yes, I know." Like,
Yeah, it's I'm always hesitant about like anybody, any like author or artist that I'm not intimately
right? You got to
familiar
look up like,
with their biography. I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
let me check something before I endorse them,
yeah,
because
yeah.
this just happens all the time. But yeah.
It's funny to think like in the comic book world too. There's like plenty of people who like used to be comic book superstars, but now just like you would never even know they exist because like they had their own like I'm thinking specifically of like I don't know if you know this guy, but like Warren Ellis is like, he was probably up there with Alan Moore as one of these people that's like, most successful comic book writers of all time. But he's like
Mhm.
he had like big time like Me Too scandal right around the time the pandemic started, like in 2020. And it's just interesting. It's like this guy who had like he had like a huge influence on like the past like 20 years of comic books, and
Uh-huh.
now it's just like you don't even hear his name, you know what I mean? Like he's like
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
exist, and
I
I'm
have
not
no idea
excusing
who
him.
that
Like,
is. So
yeah,
like, yeah.
you don't even know who he is. Yeah, he was huge. He was like, he's like borderline, he's I guess nobody is as prominent and beloved as Alan Moore, but like he's up there. You know what I'm saying? Like if there would
Mhm.
be a Mount Rushmore of comic book writers, he probably would have been on it. And now it's like he's totally off the mat. And by the way, I'm not saying like, and that's unfair. Like he should, I'm not defending him. He's a bad guy. He
Yeah,
probably
no,
deserves
the
it. But
moral is don't be a creep. Like,
yeah, I'm just saying it's notable that like, all these people, there's plenty of people who we would look on as like, oh, these great masters, but then they turn out to be like whatever pieces of shit.
it's there's a whole like because like I'm like a working artist, so I'm peripherally attached to like I don't know like kind of like comic scenes and stuff, even if I don't follow a lot of them. So there will be a lot of the times where like I'll know like an artist who works in comics, and then I'll find out from all my buddies that like, oh, he said all this insane stuff, and then it's like, and like I'll only like know them because like something like this happens where they'll do something crazy.
Right. You only know them because of the bad stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it happens more than you would think.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just hoping I don't get canceled just in the course of this podcast. And if I make it through this, I'll be happy. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you look at that like Hodorowski's Dune stuff, and it's just it's a million times more like colorful and like uh I don't know. It just had like much more of a vision where like I'm thinking like off the top of my head, there's like the Emperor's Palace had this like crazy like geometric design,
Oh yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
it's like the
It's
Emperor's
like
Palace had this big giant like almost like a diagonal, like it was like a cube kind of standing on a corner, sort of. You know what I mean? I'm not
yeah,
sure.
it has like all these like geometric patterns and stuff on
Yeah,
it,
and that
right?
was a
Like
Chris
yeah,
Foss
yeah,
design.
that was a Chris Foss hallmark. Um,
They
it's so
probably
fun. Like
used
we're
this in a
discussing
movie
like
actually.
still images from a movie that never got made, which is
Yeah, but
like
it
a
was just
testament
like,
to how well they made them, like
I mean, I
how
honestly think
evocative
you
they
could,
were.
I honestly think you could go back and be like, probably there would be no Alien, like probably there'd be no Star Wars without like Hodorowski's Dune. I'm saying because just like all the people who worked on that then went on to work on these big movies like Alien, like Blade
Hmm.
Runner, like Star Wars, like all this stuff. Um, and it just like it's it's interesting that just like this thing that never existed just became a seed that then just like flowered in a million other things.
Yeah,
Um, I'm pretty sure this Chris Foss Emperor's Palace has been used in like a different movie, like maybe I want to say like Flash Gordon or something like that, but I'm not totally sure. But
it's possible. A lot of Chris Foss art just got reused in like books and movies like all the time. They probably like he would license it out to different stuff because I've seen tons of his paintings just used like the same painting used for multiple different things.
hmm.
So yeah, probably something like that.
I also feel like, I mean, you could probably just argue this is just like this 70s sci-fi aesthetic, but like No
Yeah,
Man's
but bring it back
Sky, I
though.
feel like, what's that?
Bring it back though.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
care
I
if I
mean,
don't care if it's from the 70s. I like it.
I would love it if they made a sci-fi movie that had this style today, but also like I'm kind of like I kind of miss the idea of like that you made like a model of like a spaceship, and like I miss models. Like I wish they'd make like more models of things and rely less on CGI and just literally I don't even care if it actually looks bad is the thing. Like I kind of like what I mean? Like if you go back and watch Blade Runner, which I know you already said you haven't seen, but there's stuff in there where like for instance, there's a floating blimp that
Mhm.
like is like a whole, it's like a model, and it's just like something to it being an act. It's like there's something about it where it's an actual physical object is like it films differently than just like, okay, this is, I know I'm looking at CGI right now. This is like a cartoon I'm watching. Like somehow I like that idea, like the practical effect, but they'll never
I
do this
think
in a million gajillion years. So
I think a lot of people agree. I mean, the thing I can't get over my like the original Star Wars trilogy still looks better than every other Star Wars movie. Like
huh.
it looks more real than any subsequent Star Wars movie. Like I don't actually think there are some things you can do with CGI that like you can't do with practical media, but I think a lot of the times it's better to just film around the limitations of practical effects. Um,
Right, yeah. I mean, like CGI now has made everything possible, but like that kind of makes it so that you don't have to come up with creative solutions to special effects problems. You just say like, okay, we'll just green screen that and just, just fix that in post. But like, I don't know.
it always makes me that like America is so weird where like animated movies are for children unless the entire movie is CGI and it's a couple superheroes punching each other, and then
Right,
that's for adults.
right, yeah.
But like a Miyazaki movie is for kids.
Right, right. And then you just go watch the Hulk, like, it's just the Hulk is just a cartoon.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's
like
not.
literally at this point, like that's all animated. None of that's real. It's like, it's weird.
Yeah, I kind of miss that. Like I'm thinking now of like RoboCop. I don't know if you've seen that. Like just like I'm thinking about like there's a robot and RoboCop where just like it obviously looks like stop motion and it obviously looks fake, but you kind of like that. Like I kind of wish that that would be in like a big budget movie today, but I don't know.
No,
Nobody's listening to this.
stop
Like
motion's awesome.
what's
I
that?
used to watch stop motion is awesome. I used to
Yeah,
watch a
like
lot of Harryhausen films as a kid because
yeah, yeah. Like just
I
off
was
the
a
top of
weird
my head,
child.
like just off the top of my head, imagine if you had like a movie about like mechs, like where it was like all stop motion mechs, like giant robots that are
It would be
stop
so
motion.
good. It would be
If they
so
did that
good.
today, it'd be like Pacific Rim and everything would be CGI. But I'm saying like there's something to that lo-fi, like it's like I don't know, like there's something like someone needs to make like a big action movie that has like that 80s aesthetic of like things are stop motion, things are made of models, like you know what I mean, like I don't know.
And now I want to rewatch Jason and the Argonauts. But yeah, no, if
Huh.
they should.
Is that the one where the guy like rises out of the ocean, he's like Poseidon, like
Oh yeah, yeah.
is it?
There's
Yeah,
this.
yeah, it's great.
It's a really long scene in the middle where he's
Right.
just rising out of the ocean. Because I watched it a couple of years ago, and I'm like, wow, this is a really long scene just to show this guy pushing two rocks apart.
Right.
Yes, that is Jason and the Argonauts. It's not a
Yeah.
good movie. It's this very old campy
But
movie,
it
but
still has plenty
it's
of
so
stuff
fun to
like
watch.
is it
It's so cool.
doesn't it have that thing with like the skeleton
Yeah, it's got the big
army? Like,
skeleton fight.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They've got
That
like
that was fairly
real people fighting like
like
stop motion skeletons. It's
yes,
so
that was
cool.
like fairly innovative at the time, right? Or am I wrong? Like that was a fairly mind-blowing effect for them to
Oh no,
do.
it's you can still watch the skeleton fight scene, and it's like it's a little janky, but it's also like it's also insane to be like, wow, they were like, how did they do this? Like it's
Yeah,
crazy.
like
Like
it
yeah,
must have blown
it's
minds at the time. Like
yeah.
that was like cutting edge. Like that's what I'm saying. I kind of wish they'd make a movie like that now, where it's like you don't need to spend $200 million. Like it is so much. Like I said this on an earlier podcast. I forget with who, but it's like the American pyramids. You know what I mean? It's like you see some of these movies, and it's like, all right, this is a $250 million movie. Like it's like you know what I mean? It's like, all right, well, let's just build like a golden tomb. Like it's like the same thing. Like it's like wild like to spend that much money on like this is literally just a movie. Like it's just crazy. Like just I think you could make a good movie and it's just like budget is like $50 million, like and do this kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's wild the budgets are so big and they still like all look the same. Like the only visually distinctive big budget blockbuster movie I've seen in like many years was the first like the Spider Verse movie where it was like the mix of 2D and
Right.
3D animation. Like that was the only that's the only thing I've seen in my lifetime. Well, since Treasure Planet came out, that I was
Huh.
like, this is the potential for a big budget
I'm pretty
animated
sure this is
movie
the
that
second
isn't an
time someone
anime.
mentioned Treasure Planet, I think.
I will die on this hill. I came out at the perfect age where I got to see Atlantis and Treasure Planet as a kid. And those were the two best Disney movies, and you can never change my mind. And they're both awesome. And
Huh.
that's what big budget animation could have been like if Shrek hadn't come out and everything is CGI schlock now.
Speaking
This
of
is
Atlantis, I'm pretty sure Atlantis had like design work by Mike Mignola, like the comic book artist.
yeah, you can find a ton of his concept art for it, and it looks great.
Yeah, so
And
like
they did a
yeah, so
pretty
that's
good
like
job
this is like a
translating
perfect
his style.
example. This is like what we're talking about. Like, like get
Yeah, this
comic
is what
book people to like do your movies. Like,
when the
you
when
know,
the next Dune adaptation comes out, and it's me and Goran and Artyom
that would
and
literally
Ollie
rule. Like,
Schermacher, it'll be the best movie ever
yes,
made.
that would literally rule. Like, I'm not completely unironically, like, this is all just complete fantasy stuff, but like, if I were to make like a big budget sci-fi movie tomorrow, that's literally what I would do. I'd be like, you guys, I don't know, I might get like do you know like a Calum Stephen Diggle? Like I
Yeah. Oh
probably
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
like I probably get him
Callum's
making the
awesome.
spaceships.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, like
he
he does
does.
this book called
He's got
Humanity
such a great head
Lost.
for design. Yeah, yeah. I haven't read Humanity Lost, but I need to because actually, fun fact about me: I got to read a very early draft of Humanity Lost years ago that
Oh, interesting.
he completely scrapped. Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know.
he
I don't
like
know.
started over.
Yeah, so I don't know if any
Interesting.
of that was canon. He like sent it like he found me way back in the day, and was like, "Hey man, would you read this?" And I was like, "I don't know anything about comics. I don't know why you're asking me to, but yes, I will read it."
Huh.
And didn't give you feedback. I was not qualified to do it, but he asked me to, and maybe that's still on my computer somewhere because I have an old computer.
Yeah, no, I mean, for people who don't know, I mean, maybe I should change the podcast to be called For People Who
For
Don't
people
Know.
who don't
But
know,
Calum Stephen Diggle is his name. He has a Patreon for his comic book that he's putting out called Humanity Lost. And he has like almost like I would almost call it like a photo realistic style almost like of this like space sci-fi stuff. And he just has such an eye for like realistic space sci-fi stuff. You could probably buy one of the volumes of Humanity Lost on Amazon now.
yeah,
Um,
I think there's physical copies of it now.
yeah, yeah,
I gotta get a copy because it looks amazing, and he's a great artist. I just I don't read that many comics. That's as we keep coming
yeah.
back
I
to
hear you.
this.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm just looking. I'm just completely absorbed in these Mike Mignola. And again, for people who don't know, Mike Mignola is like you probably know, like Hellboy. He's like the artist who created Hellboy, wrote Hellboy, sort of the mastermind behind that. I'm looking at a picture here where they have Atlantis characters meeting Hellboy, so that's kind of funny. But
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, I mean, it's funny you name those two movies because those are like the only Disney movies I really haven't seen is like Atlantis and Treasure Planet.
They're the only
Um,
good Disney movies.
huh.
It's no, I mean, I,
I totally get why you would say that though, because
it's
it's completely fits with your.
I came up I was growing up at the only time that Disney was making movies that catered to me because I hate musicals and I hate talking animal movies
Right.
and
And it's like a brief window where it was
yeah,
like
and for like
sci-fi
for
genre.
a couple years they were making weird sci-fi movies and I got to watch them. I also really liked Emperor's New Groove, which also came out around the same time. I
More
think I like
musical though.
that's not a musical. No.
Oh, it isn't? I thought there was music
No,
in there.
it doesn't no, that's why it's good. It's a
Oh,
weird
all
movie
right, fair
because
enough.
it's like it feels more like Looney Tunes humor.
Hmm.
And like David Spade is the emperor. It's a weird movie. It
Right.
doesn't feel like a Disney movie. It's very strange. It's
I
great.
always liked Hercules. That's probably my favorite, if I had to say.
Hercules is pretty cool, actually. I do like. I mean, I don't actually hate the Disney Renaissance movies. I
All
like
right,
Hercules and
fair enough.
Mulan. But the top tier for me is Atlantis and Treasure Planet. Deeply flawed movies, both of them, but like visually impeccable, and at least they were trying something interesting.
Yeah, definitely, man. I'm just looking through like the Mike Mignola like designs as I'm talking to you, and they're like really great. I mean, I really stand by what I'm saying here. That if I were to make a big sci-fi movie, I would just get, you know, comic book artists basically to
Yeah,
do it. I
you
mean,
gotta find some weird artist that people don't know, and then have them do your like. Because I'm at the point where the only reason I'm online is to follow other artists and bands to get tour dates. But I only at this point I only really just follow smaller comics guys, or like just
yeah,
people drawing weird stuff, because that's, I don't know, that's the only thing that's like interesting. Like there's so many people that can do like photorealistic space marine paintings, but at a certain point they all look the same.
right. And you could also,
It's
you could
weird.
spend your whole life just like retweeting like Spider-Man or whatever. Like it's sort of like a little, you know
Yeah,
what I
and
mean? It's
people
like they don't
do.
need our help basically. Like they'll be okay. Like they don't need the retweets or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I want to see something bizarre, and you can only get that when you follow smaller artists.
Right. And then, smaller artists become, you know what I mean? Like the smaller artists become, next year's superstars. So, it's also just
Hopefully,
interesting.
yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, well, there's plenty of people I could think of that went on, that started out, just like the kind of people we're talking about. And like, some of
Mhm.
these guys we're talking about, like I'm saying, like Art Yom Trakanoff is fairly big or whatever, but I don't
Yeah, no,
know.
it's
Let's
I know
just
what you mean.
ruminate on our success or lack of success and just completely just derail the podcast with that.
No, no, I totally get what you mean.
But totally dead air. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I mean, what are the other big influence? I mean, we were talking Dune for a bit. Like, Dune, I feel like there's a whole realm of like what, I would almost say like Sword and Planet style uh genre books or whatever. Like, is there other stuff that's like you said Hyperion?
Yeah, like I love Hyperion. I mean,
Were you a
like,
Darkover person?
huh?
Were you Darkover? Have you heard of that?
What is that? No, I haven't heard of that.
There's a pretty big like there's a whole genre called like Sword and Planet. And you could even argue maybe that like Star Wars is a little bit Sword and Planet because it's like where you're mixing like medieval, sword and sorcery uh style stories with like sci-fi. So like
Hmm.
Star Wars is a little bit like that because they're fighting with swords, like Obi-Wan is a wizard, Palpatine is an evil wizard, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of mixing medieval fantasy sort of with like sci-fi. But yeah, I
Hmm.
mean Darkover, I don't even really know much about Darkover. I just know it was like a big sword and planet
I
series. And it's
actually,
since, by the way, this is another example, like Marion Zimmer Bradley, who wrote this, is like another example of a person who's completely like, came out many years later that she's like super abusive to her children or whatever. So,
oh
you know what I mean?
jeez.
Like, yeah, like, I'm talking about like, child sex abuse type allegations. So like super serious shit. But this was like a major series in its day, you know what I mean? So I thought
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
you might have heard.
good jumping off the point to I'm a huge HP Lovecraft fan, but not
Yeah,
for any of
yeah.
not for any of his personal views.
Right, yeah.
um, I love the like HP Lovecraft. There's another guy people don't know about as much. He's still kind of famous. This guy Clark Ashton Smith
Huh.
he was like friends with Lovecraft, and he wrote a lot of. I would describe him as like, if you like HP Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith is like weirder but less consistent.
Hmm.
Like some of his stories are just bad, but like the good ones are great, and like he does so many weird stories. Yeah, like I liked a lot of weird, like old school weird fiction. I like that stuff. I mean, I've always liked. I mean, I read like Neuromancer and stuff when I was in middle school,
Oh,
or like in
interesting.
the.
I just
Yeah, I
read
liked.
I just read that whole trilogy like over the past few years.
Oh yeah, I read Count Zero a few last year. I haven't read Mona Lisa Overdrive yet.
It's good. I mean,
Um,
that's the last one. I read that. It's just like the other ones, you know what I mean? It's like deserves to be in that trilogy, I guess.
yeah, no, I mean, like a lot of. I was always reading weird sci-fi novels ever since I was a kid. And I guess I'm naming like super basic stuff right now, but like if somebody wants a full reading list from me, I'll give you every strange book I've read.
Hmm.
Um, I always liked that kind of stuff. I mean, I liked. I don't know, like Akira, Ghost in the Shell. Like I love that kind of like old sci-fi anime kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, the probably the single biggest artistic influence on me is like Wayne Barlow,
Oh yeah,
who's not a
yeah.
comics guy, but is like mostly an oil painter. But oh man, I think I actually had some of his books when I was very little, and then he has like an Alphabet of Dinosaurs book that I had when I was a kid that I
Huh.
loved.
Wow.
And like yeah, and then like
So that
when
that
I
was
started.
probably like a huge influence on you because you like you're like a dinosaur guy, right? Like
Oh
you.
yeah, no, it's so funny. So like I had that book when I was a kid, and then probably like when I was like, I don't know, 12, 13, I started going on like art forums and stuff, and people would mentioning this name. I'm like, that sounds familiar. And I remember like going through my bookshelves. I'm like, oh my god, I've had this forever, and it is really good. And I all throughout middle school, I tracked down a bunch of his books through like libraries or like, if I could like like I was always like an annoying kid at Christmas where like I wouldn't ask for much, but it would be like this weird book that's out of print from this sci-fi author from the 70s.
Huh.
And so I'd like my like in the early days of the internet, my parents are like trying to track down like old Wayne Barlow illustrated books for me.
So you did this book with a couple other people, like fill in details if I'm messing
Yeah,
anything up.
yeah.
Like
I know where you're
you
yeah, I know where you're going.
like Berzock's.
Berzak's Mercenary Handbook. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Berzock's
So that
Mercenary
was
Hand.
that was a book I did with Alan Gruder, aka Bag Boss, and Ollie Schermacher, who goes by Ordheist, and a guy named Robert Wood Peters, who did the writing. And he doesn't have I don't remember what his Twitter handle is,
Hmm.
but he doesn't post that much. So but yeah, that's a book we all did that is kind of a send up to, back in the 70s, Wayne Barlow would do these like Barlow's Guide to
Yes,
Extraterrestrials,
that's
where
what I
it's
was
like,
looking at. It. I was wondering,
yes,
like, so is that an
yes.
influence?
Oh,
Like,
that's a direct influence.
interesting.
We were all
Barlow's
taught like
Guide to Extraterrestrials.
it's this book where like he illustrated all these like old sci-fi aliens like from novels and old short stories, and he just illustrated them and gave these little couple paragraph blurbs on the sides. And there were other books like that. There used to be like these Star Wars Guide to Droids books that like we all kind of loved
Huh.
growing up. But yeah, we all loved these kind of like visual encyclopedia type books, and it was
Of
kind of
like
like,
worlds that don't exist.
yeah, stuff like that. I like that's the kind of stuff where like I haven't read a lot of comics, but that whole micro genre of like books is like I've read all of those. I've read like After Man, I've read like Expedition, like any kind of book like that I've read.
Huh.
But yeah, like so we had all kind of read those books and we all talked with each other and we are like, what if we just did our own version of that? It's like it's an extremely derivative idea. Like we knew what we were doing, but it's like, what if we made up all the characters and stories ourselves and drew them all?
No, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't even
Yeah.
say it's necessarily derivative. I mean, it's like you're doing something and it's like a genre. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's not derivative just to do something in the same genre. You know what I'm saying?
It's such a small genre that it feels like you're copying someone,
All right,
but
fine. It's plagiarism. I
yeah,
admit it.
it's yeah. I guess that's kind of the thing. But we had a blast. And I don't know, it was pretty well received as far as I know.
Yeah,
Nobody
no, I
told
mean,
us it was bad, but
I was
also it was
saying
like mostly our
before,
friends and family buying it. So
listen, I was saying before about like Grizz Grobus, like I would also put up Burzox as like I was like, I have now become something of like a little bit of like a Kickstarter slash online comics like expert. Like like I have like a lot of them, like a lot, like an absurd amount. And
mhm.
like I'll say like Grizz Grobus, I would say Burzox. Like I don't want to go through the full list of everything, but like that's up there as like one of the most professional, like most polished, like best ones. It's like extremely impressive.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
I mean, I gotta give like, the rest of the team were
yeah,
really
for sure.
instrumental in making
Ollie
it professional.
Schermacher.
Yeah, like I like they all did the layout and contacting the printers and stuff. Like I was still working a full time job at that point, so I just did character illustrations and a little bit of writing. They were
Interesting.
they were really they really put it together. So if it looks if you think it looks professional, it's because of the combined
All right,
efforts
so
of
you
the
heard it
the rest of
here.
the team.
Lil Tachyon is taking all the credit. Those other guys didn't do anything. No, I'm kidding.
No,
But like,
I'm very happy with what I contributed, but I just want to like they did a lot of work. Like
yeah, for sure.
they did the work that wasn't fun. I was just there for the fun parts.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's probably going to be a clip of this. They're probably going to be tagged. They're going to be aware that they're getting credit. But it's interesting to talk to you because like you're saying like, okay, I was in middle school and I'm on, or maybe not middle school, but I was young and I'm like on DeviantArt. Then like
Oh yeah,
as I get
definitely middle
older,
school.
like
I was very young.
yeah, middle school,
Yeah.
yeah. So and then I'm on Tumblr later. Like you kind of grew up like in this like there's like a DeviantArt world, there's like a Tumblr world, like they don't even exist anymore, really. Like there's
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of
grew up when the internet was fun, and now it's not anymore.
but I'm just trying to I'm kind of like driving at like you are kind of an artist who came up in this atmosphere of like, okay, you post your work on DeviantArt, now you post your work on Tumblr, and there's like a network of other artists who are like liking your stuff and like connecting with you. You know what I mean? And it's like, what would you say to like, let's say I'm like a 15-year-old artist and I'm like, okay, I want to get into, illustration or not even necessarily comic book art because that's not like your main thing, but like I want to get into this world of like, sort of sci-fi adjacent art. Like, what do you even do now? Like, would you say, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh man, it's weird because like kind of every website is so up in the air right now.
right.
It's like I've kind of like even before like Twitter started tanking, like probably since 2019ish, I've been posting on just most social medias because like I don't know, you kind of have to.
You just
It's
do them all
annoying.
basically.
Yeah, it's like honestly the best thing you can like you post your work wherever you want. I actually I will come out and say I think Tumblr is a better website than most of them at this point.
Interesting.
It's
But it's so like I don't even ever use it at all. It's like it's so
it's
like
you
off the
can
radar.
it's kind of this is my personal preference. I think it works better for seeing people's art actually because you can go through like an archive of people's stuff and it doesn't immediately swallowed by retweets.
Hmm.
And also you can find a lot of smaller artists that way. And like if you like and I think the biggest thing this works on every website and like just tell people you like their stuff like especially like if it's other smaller artists like don't be disingenuous about it but like if there's somebody you really like and like you think their art school is like like that's how I met a lot of people is like them
Yeah.
messaging me or
It's
me
like don't be
messaging
afraid
them.
to reach out and
Yeah,
say
people love being praised
not
like
even necessarily privately you're even saying, right? Just like do like a comment that just says like, I
yeah,
this is
yeah, or
amazing.
like I would have people message me or stuff like that, and it's always I don't know, it's really sweet. And sometimes if you like go and you like their stuff too, then you can start talking. Like that's I feel like yeah, if I was that like that was a thing I didn't do till because I'm not a particularly outgoing guy, and I had other people kind of contact me first. And I remember being like, "Wow, people look at my drawings. That's crazy." And I to this
Yeah, I
day I still
mean,
kind of feel like that. But yeah, if you want to meet other people, like you just kind of like say hi to them. Don't be annoying, but like if you have something genuine to say to someone and just say it usually can't hurt.
yeah, for sure. I mean, you're saying like it blows your mind that like people like your stuff. I mean, it's like you're getting up there in terms of like you have a pretty large I know Twitter/X is now like a very weird atmosphere now, but like you're getting up there where you're like close to 28,000 followers. So it's like hard for me to even wrap my head around like what is that like from your experience? So like you must get like all kinds of people messaging you with like I bet a lot of them are like scams or like,
Oh,
like you probably get
tons of
like
scams. Yeah, the
yeah, yeah,
scams
yeah.
definitely. It's funny, like you don't get more genuine people messaging you. It's just like more scams.
Right.
Yeah, I don't. It, I truly don't like. I'm not really great at social media. Like I don't. I think part of it is just kind of luck. I honestly
Right.
think like I try to do like
But
I
what would you
post on a
say was
couple
like the
different
arc for
websites, but
you? It was like posting like, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get a picture of, like, how exactly did it
Um,
happen that you go from like no followers to like nearly 30,000 followers, you know? Like was it scary? Like, yeah, cuz if it's me, I might be like, "Oh my god, like this tweet has 500 retweets." Like I might be sweating a little bit, you know? But I'm not
I
posting
mean,
art. I'm just posting my dumbass opinions. So,
yeah, for me it's like so like when I started like posting again seriously, like one of my like best like real life friends, who I will plug, her name is Doodles with Angie. Hi Angie, you probably won't listen to this. But if you search Doodles with Angie, she's on most websites. And she already kind of had a big following on like Tumblr and stuff, so she would like retweet my stuff, and that helped me. Um, but then I don't know. I think most other websites, I just kind of got lucky, like where other artists would find me and then kind of boost me. Like I guess I post consistently. I started really taking
that's a
off.
big part of it, right?
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
You
But
can't
it's
be
it's
posting like one drawing a month or 2 months and
yeah,
then
but it's
expect
like
to like,
here's the thing. I don't like if you're just starting to draw stuff, post stuff when it's fun for you. The reason
right.
I post a lot of stuff up until very recently, the reason has been just because I draw a lot. And even and like and now I draw for a living, so I draw even more. Like so I just had lots of new drawings to post online, and I like doing that because I like I don't know, I like showing off the stuff I draw, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
get like the
It's
immediate
good.
feedback of like,
Yeah, and it's cool. Like it's cool if other people like it, and I don't know. I like sharing it, I guess. But don't like feel like you should be sharing stuff that you like to draw, not drawing stuff so you can share it. At least
don't
that's
draw for clout.
yeah, this is I mean, I'm not trying to be like take some kind of moral high ground here. Like this is legitimately how I've approached it. It's probably not the best social media strategy, which is why I think I just got lucky and I just happened to draw a lot. But I would because but I do seriously believe like there are like a whole bunch of artists that like that I know that get plenty of work and they don't it's not like they have like tons of followers, but
Right.
they know the right people,
Right.
and they make good art. And I think that's probably a better way to think about it, especially with how weird the whole social media ecosystem is right now. Like,
Right. Yeah. Now is very uncertain where like, you know, if Twitter, you know, slash X shut down next month, like my head would not explode. Like it wouldn't be that shocking. I'm not hoping for that outcome, but I'm just saying it's
yeah,
like
no, I mean,
everything's sort
this
of up
is,
in the air.
I mean, that's, I was kind of, I had a lucky inspiration, like, in like 2021 ish or 2022, I forget. I like set up like a website and an email newsletter. Like, because I mean, Twitter wasn't even imploding back then. I was just like, this would be fun to
You
do.
got to have
And
your own
yeah,
sort of like,
now I can redirect people there, and I'm not like dependent on an algorithm. But it's the kind of thing where like if you already don't have a following online, like I don't know how much of a point to that there is. It's very annoying. It's not like when I was a kid, people just had personal websites and you would find them
right.
through web rings and stuff, and it was awesome. And I want to go back to
Right.
that.
It's kind of funny to like think back on like, you know, there were comic book creators who like Brian Bendis, who is like you know, he's up there as one of the most successful comic book writers ever. Like, um, he had his own forum. You know, like Mark Miller, had his own forum. Like Warren Ellis, who I mentioned earlier, like had his own forum. Like it was like everyone, like anyone who was huge would just. And by the way, Joe Rogan had his own forum too. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm saying like there's a pattern of like, you know, it helps you like once you're big, it helps you to become even bigger to sort of have your own little world. And then now that has sort of gone away. And now it's just like you just have like a subreddit, basically. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's I'm I
Like
think it
Reddit has
might
basically swallowed up that concept.
Reddit is so weird because it's the last like old website that's still big. Like it doesn't feel like social media. It's still kind of an older forum kind of thing. And I don't even
Right.
use Reddit that much. The interface is not super I'm not super great with it. But like
I
It's kind of
read the
interesting to me.
comments, but I never post or comment myself. But I do
Yeah,
read. I do
yeah.
read different things on there.
But it
But
is it is it is interesting. I think, and maybe this is just wishful thinking on my part, but I think some aspect of that kind of personal website slash forum thing might be coming back. I don't know if forums are coming back. I think that might be replaced by Discord servers, unfortunately.
huh.
But I know a lot of other artists who are like either making a website or making just an email newsletter.
Listen,
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
kind of what I'm driving at is like this pod right now talking to you is kind of like I'm trying to do that myself. Like just have like, a bit of your own platform where like, people could hear you talk and like, I could expound on whatever I want. And just if I want to, I could make a podcast tomorrow where I just do a 2 hour podcast about like Hodorowski's Dune or, and I could get it out of my system. You know what I'm saying?
Or
And
where you
like,
make a dangerous accusation and then say allegedly to give yourself
right. Yeah. Just
plausible
say,
deniability.
yeah, exactly. Just say allegedly
Yeah,
Moebius was a secret serial killer. Allegedly,
allegedly.
and just go on for hours like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to say like, this sort of format for me is kind of like that, where I could just like basically just speak authentically and openly and show some level of vulnerability and people will give me thousands of dollars for it. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
And then I'll have,
no, it's no. There's a need for like self-expression that isn't dictated by however many characters you can fit on a Twitter
yeah,
post
I'm
or
not,
like
yeah, in
yeah.
this format, like, I've had some level of success like posting on Twitter and just like saying interesting things about comics that could go like, super, super mildly viral and I've had an ability to get a certain amount of engagement. But what I'm trying to say is like, you'll never connect with people in like whatever 240 characters or whatever it is. Like, you'll never connect with people as well as you can just like me talking to you right now, like we're having a conversation,
Mhm.
like it's way more relatable like to be like talking to each other, than just like okay, like I'm just like I'm no longer just text on the screen. Like now here's an actual person like with feelings and a perspective that's like talking and stuff. I don't know. And we could, you and I could have a conversation like about art and sci-fi that like feels like it has the potential to be a lot more nuanced than like just like if we were tweeting back and forth, like, doesn't,
Yeah.
it's like,
No, it's yeah, people need their own spaces and not, corporate social media
yeah.
stuff.
And yeah, and if, I guess in theory this podcast is probably going to be on Spotify and things that are, just big corporate platforms, no different than X, I guess. But I get in some level it's independent from X in the sense that like, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket of X, like because X could be gone like in a month, or whatever, or it could just be so inhospitable that it's not gone, but just like comic book artists or artists in general just like can't get a foothold because like, it's like the thing that the algorithm prioritizes is like fucking like anti-vax shit or whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I just yeah, I'm at a point where like I don't I will post something online and then I just log out of the website right after. Usually I try to because then I don't end up looking at all these notifications and I can just focus on
yeah,
whatever actual conversations with people
right.
I want to maintain.
That's sort of the double-edged sword too. If I mentioned like I've had an ability to have some tweets like be pretty successful in the comic book world or whatever. That's sort of like the double-edged sword of it is it's like, okay, now I'm very distracted by like, all right, I'm getting 100 retweets here, but like now it's like this is kind of taking up my whole day and this, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's, it's like I've joked before that the ultimate move is to like tweet something and then to like just put your phone in airplane mode because you're working or whatever. So like you don't even,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like for all you know, it could be getting no response. It could be getting a great response. Like does it, like I'm in the clouds, baby. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm in airplane mode. Like I'm up here in the sky. Like I have
You
no
can't even
idea,
touch me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say I had perfect discipline to always do that, but
Nah, none
you
of
know?
us do, but if we all, you got to make an effort. Like I find myself getting drawn back in, and then I have to be like, all right, download everything and log yourself
Yeah.
out.
That's
Uh,
part of the problem with this is it's like these social media apps, it's like a casino. You know what I mean? It's like designed to addict you and there's no windows, like there's no
oh yeah,
clocks. Like
they're
it's
all they're all
designed.
they're horrible little Skinner boxes where you
Yeah,
get
it's like a
your
labyrinth
little,
where yeah,
yeah.
it's like it's designed to keep you walking through the corridors of the labyrinth, not to like go read a book or like write or draw. Like you're supposed to be scrolling. But
My one piece of legitimate advice to anyone listening to this, and this is a thing I actually do, this is not a joke, is like if you want to read a book, physically throw your phone at a couch or something, like so it won't break, but like you have the catharsis of releasing it from you, and then you can't reach it, and then you can read your book in peace. I do this a lot.
yeah, I mean, it's tough because like I read a lot. It's like, you know, it's one of these things where you have to have like discipline to be like I'll read like 30 minutes a day minimum, and I'll do literally like a timer. So like it's like the discipline of just like reading for 30 minutes. It's like
Mm.
I'm not like checking my phone in that time, like, you know, um, it's like this thing or it's like nobody could make you do it. You know what I mean? You have to have like, it's like anything that you practice or work on, you kind of sort of have to have the discipline to be like, okay, I'm reading for 30 minutes. The amount of pages that I read in that time is like the amount of pages that I read. Like, you can't like beat yourself up if you read too slow or, like just like if you read 10 pages in 30 minutes, like that's totally fine. Like that's what it is, like, but you chip away at these things, like you don't read a book like in a marathon of being like, okay, I'm going to read this book. And then you read it in 48 hours. Like you chip away at it like 30 minutes at a time. But,
Yeah, that's fun. It's the same way I taught myself to draw. Is I would literally set a timer and be like, "All right, you got to draw for this line," and like I would have specific things to practice. But like, yeah, I did it very regimented.
yeah, I mean, that's a good practice to have. Just like, I'm sure you could talk about this probably forever, but it's like, you can't get good at drawing by being a writer. No, I'm kidding. By, like by just like talking about drawing, reading about drawing, like watching YouTube videos about drawing. Like the only way you're going to get better is like actually drawing. And you're probably going to have to draw like a lot of like stuff that from your perspective, you're going to think is bad. Like you're
Yeah,
probably
you
going to,
just fail and fail and fail for like
yeah,
3 years, and then
until you
eventually
get
you make
good.
something you're kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
proud
I
of.
mean, the only reason I mean, I joked a little bit before. The only reason I feel even semi confident talking about this because like I'm not an artist is that like writing is the same thing. Like, like you want to write like the perfect thing that's like your masterpiece, like right out of the gate, except like you're not gonna. Like you have to accept like you're probably gonna write a lot of bad stuff before you get good. And even when you are good, your first draft is not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be bad too. Like you're probably going to have
Yeah.
to go over your first draft and fix that. Like, and that's part of the process of writing. Like, um, it's not like improvising or like doing a podcast where, I'm not going to edit any of this. Like, except for all the times that I was saying stupid shit, which you won't even hear that because I cut all that out. So everything you've heard has been
Except for all
smart.
the actionable threats I made against world leaders, but you won't hear it because they've been edited out.
If anyone is listening to this, the whole thing should sound super smart and cool because I edited out. And if you disagree with that, you're wrong because
Yeah,
I
you're
I
wrong.
edited out all the stupid stuff. So I don't know how you could even say that, but um, I'm like looking. I'm like as I'm rambling incoherently, I'm looking at like some of your art here, and I'm just like I'm looking at this piece you did called "The Shifting City," and I'm just thinking like, how do you approach something like this? Like it has like, you know, um, it has like a lived reality to it that like, I'm not sure if this is on the pod or before the call, but you were saying like kind of similar to Moebius. Like, is it, you're looking at historical, you know, pictures of the way people dressed and like different cultures? Like, how do you give it that kind of like, real quality, I guess, of like like a lived in world, I guess. How do you give it that context where it feels like I could read a story that's like, okay, there's 50 years of history behind this picture, but obviously that's an illusion because I'm just looking at a single image, but
No, that's a really hard thing. I would that's almost a separate skill from drawing. It's is you
it's like
This is actually where
research.
this is where you kind of can get good at drawing by reading. Like
Right.
you have to take an interest in real life. And I don't know, study.
You have
Like I
to
read
like
like
absorb influences and like,
yeah, you build up a visual library. You find out what stuff interests you, like architecture, clothing, costumes, like city, like when any kind of thing like that, it is interesting to you, and then you draw it and you make notes about it, and you learn a little bit more about it over time and over time, and it builds up in your head, like these specific costumes or compositions that you kind of have kind of pre-built in your mind, and then you can deploy at will. And then you pull up reference when necessary. And that's kind of a whole like parallel skill to the actual technical drawing part,
right.
is like
Just like the mechanical
yeah.
aspect of drawing with your hand, like what you're talking about is like a different dimension of it. It's not, it's not the technical skill of like anatomy, perspective, lighting. Like it's now in a different realm of like almost like costume design sort of necessitates that you know something about like clothing design, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like specific, like this is a very specific thing for me. Is like I've always found like costume designs like really interesting. Just clothing in general.
Hmm.
I used to do like hobbyist sewing, and I do.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I think clothes are interesting. So like if I see an outfit that like online, or even out, like if I'm not, if like I'm on like a train or something, I will like draw other people if I think they have like cool shoes or like a cool coat or something.
Huh.
Um and I think a lot of stuff like that is really interesting. I don't know. I read, I read a lot of like history books and like stuff like that. I think um I've always found like non-Western cultures really interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know how to. I hope I'm not phrasing this in like a bad way, but like I never like okay like when I'm a kid, like I was never interested in like nice knights and castles. Like I thought like
Right.
samurai were cool, and like I would like we were to talk about the movies that came out. I saw like Atlantis has like all these like South Pacific influences on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I was always I like El Dorado came, and like Prince of Egypt came out when I was a kid, and like so I was like, oh, this stuff is so cool. I don't ever want to draw a guy in a castle. I want to draw like pyramids, or like stuff in like the Andes mountains or stuff like that. So I always and this is a very surface level description of things. But like eventually you grow up and you try to read more about this kind of stuff. Like I'll literally, like the other day, like I downloaded like an academic paper on like the economic structure of the Incan Empire, because I was like, oh,
Huh.
this sounds neat. And like I don't know, if stuff interests you, like then follow it where it leads you. And hopefully you, yeah, and I don't know, try to talk to real people about it if you like meet somebody from that area of the world. I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, the to make a, like if you're doing like fantasy sci-fi illustration, like the best place to draw from is honestly the real world, and you can recontextualize it into a genre fiction setting once you have enough practice doing so. um, but yeah, it's a good question, because it really is kind of a different skill than just, yeah, the mechanical aspects of drawing, painting, rendering, like you said.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's even as I'm talking to you, I'm still like scrolling through. I think I'm looking at Inktober 2020, where you could really see like it's easy to see. Like there's one here where day 5, it's like a guy is, I don't know how you describe this. He has like a stick over his shoulder where he's like like on the stick is balanced like two bowls that have like food in it. You know what I'm I don't know if
Oh
it's.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not
No,
describing it so great, like the listener probably
I
has
know
no
what it is
idea.
because it's my drawing, but yeah, but like
Yeah, of course,
for
yeah.
whoever's listening to this may have
But
no
like you
idea.
have a super interesting coat design. You know, you could see like that Eastern influence that you're talking about. Like, you know, the shoe, even though the shoes, it's like a fairly like low res depiction. It's not like, you know, it's fair, you know what I mean? It's not like you're not showing the stitching on the shoes, but it's still it's
Hmm.
like a very interesting like um design just on the shoes. I mean, I could see the kind of things you're talking about. But yeah, there's one here where there's like a woman in a dress that is very much like looks, you know, it's like these things look um like they come from reality or whatever. Like it's, you know, I get what you're saying that it's sort of like the only way you can achieve that effect is like by trying to become somewhat well read of in that sort of stuff. Like, you know, having sort of like a vocabulary, I guess, of that kind of thing. And you can't, you know, if someone wanted to become if someone is a huge Logan Stahl fan and wants to become like you, it wouldn't really do much to be like, okay, you know, you can only follow your own interests, is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say. Like you
yeah,
kind of,
100%. Like there's every artist has like their thing that they're like they you can tell they love drawing it. Um,
yeah, it has to kind of emerge from like, I really like Turkish garb or something. And so I've become an expert about that. You know what I mean? It has to emerge from like, you know, to use a Joseph Campbell saying, like to like follow your bliss of like the thing that you're interested in. Um, Again, I'm speaking completely out of turn here because like I'm not a artist, so it's different for me, but it's similar to writing in the sense of like the things you're interested in, you just like, you know, you just have to dive deeply into it. You can't question it, I guess. Who knows where these things come from? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I
why
think
should you be interested in like Eastern stuff? And by the way, like I'm a big like only in the past several years I've become like super interested in like Japanese design aesthetic. You probably know from that short story that we did for Holy West that I'm a big like wristwatch guy. And like it
yeah.
kind of started through that because I'm like a huge Seiko fan. And then I started to realize like, oh, like Seiko is actually just like they're just doing like Japanese design, like, you know, and then there's like a whole world of that. And so it's like you become interested in the things you're interested in, and then that branches out into other things. So you don't know that it's going to lead there. It's not like I became obsessed with wristwatches and then I was like, okay, uh really my true goal is to become interested in Japan. Like, no, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can just kind of follow your bliss and it just leads to where it's going to go. And I don't know. I guess maybe the take home message here is to like become deeply interested in something, you know?
Hmm.
Don't just read comic books. Like, don't just, you know,
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
just
like
read books. Like, you have to, like, a whole, I don't know, you have to have a wide range of interests to be like interesting, I guess.
yeah, always try new things, and then you'll find stuff you didn't know you liked before. But then it's also like if there's something that you know you like, follow that too. It's like you got it's hard to balance it, but yeah, I mean, like I think that the key thing is like don't stop enjoying something just because you think
It's not popular. It's not like
yeah it's
cool or
yeah, it's like I don't know when I was like 'cause I play a couple different instruments, and like when I was like teaching myself like how to play guitar and stuff, like it became a lot easier for me when I just embraced that I really like, you know, like stupid pop punk songs.
hmm,
But you learn, but like you if you act like if you follow the stuff you're interested in, it becomes much easier to learn something.
hmm. Yeah, because you're not like forcing yourself to do something that sort of like you feel like is like, okay, this is, you know, what you're supposed to do. You know, like I'm a guitarist, so I'm supposed to play Freebird. I'm supposed to play Hotel California.
It would be cool if I could play Freebird. It's a great song.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah, you follow what you love, and then eventually you'll find out you love other things, and it's all cool if you any picking up any kind of creative skill is always extremely rewarding if you're lucky enough to have the time to pursue it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah.
Wouldn't you say like there's something to the idea of like marrying like sci-fi aesthetic to like more of like a cultural, you know what I mean? Like you're, like marrying the out there like sci-fi aesthetic to like real world sort of clothing and styles. Like I'm looking at a picture here you have of a guy who's like, I guess this was day 21. That's obviously not going to mean anything to you, but like a guy who's like, he's like standing with a bear and he has like, almost looks like he's like a wildlife ranger guy. He has like a bear standing next to him. And it's like,
Hmm.
I'm saying I could picture you being like, okay, this is a park ranger in the future or in space or something. You see what I'm saying? It's like marrying that real world thing to something that's fantastical and sci-fi. Like, I don't know.
It usually, I think, from an illustration standpoint, it usually doesn't take that much to make it feel sci-fi. Like you're better off drawing like a pretty believable outfit and then like adding an antenna or a cool helmet on top. Like that's what
Huh.
all of the original Star Wars is. Like,
Right. Yeah.
but I think like
That's
another
like
thing. This
I'm thinking of like the costumes in Empire Strikes Back when they're on Hoth. Like that's kind of exactly what you're saying. They just have like winter clothes, but you know what I mean? Like,
and you just add like one cool helmet or mask or something, and that's
right.
that's usually enough. And I think like a general thing for like sci-fi. This is not even like an illustration thing. Like this is just broader. I don't remember. This might have been like some random like history lecture I put on YouTube or something. But like they're talking about like the older a technology is, like the better a chance people will still be using it in the future. Like we still have wheels. Like
Right.
that's multiple millennia we've had wheels, and like we'll probably still have wheels that like you can make a believable future that will feel less dated if you actually put some older technology in there and then just dress it up aesthetically to look more futuristic. Yeah,
That's
that's a little
interesting.
little
You
little little life hack for illustrators there.
you really have got to see Blade Runner because there's stuff in there that it's like it's almost exactly what you're describing, where it'll be like, okay, it'll be like a typewriter keyboard, but then it's like hooked up to like a computer screen. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
the
you do
old
something like
aesthetic.
that.
It's like, or like there's a famous thing in Blade Runner, called the Voight comp machine. And it's like a masterpiece of like prop design where like it has like a weird accordion on it that is like breathing in and out, like what do you call it? Like a bellows, I guess is probably the correct term. It's like an
Mhm.
accordion bellows that's like squeezing in and out, but it's like attached to this thing that's like a retina scanner that's like, it's kind of what you're saying. It's like this
Oh
old
yeah, I'm looking
technology.
this up. This is so cool.
Yeah, like the Voight comp machine is like, this is a non-controversial statement. It's like one of these absolute classics of like physical prop design. But this is sort of what I'm talking about that I wish they would get back to is like, don't show me like a computer generated cartoon that I know you're like the people who actually make that, you're like working them to the absolute bone. And you're like, you're telling them also like, by the way, like, I don't really give a shit if it actually looks good. It just matters to me that like, make sure it's done in 48 hours. Like, that's sort of the attitude there. That's almost like, you know, like a little bit of like modern day. Like I'm just every time I talk, I'm afraid I'm going to cancel myself. But like it's almost like a sweatshop, or you know what I'm saying? Like
I mean, I
it's
think
like,
there's been a lot of reporting on like the working conditions for visual effects artists where
yeah,
yeah, it kind of
definitely. I'm
more or
not going to
less is a
cancel myself. I'm
sweatshop.
I'm on
Yeah,
the right side of
I think you're on
history
the right
here.
side on this one.
Yes.
um,
I guess just like in the last like few minutes, like, um, what is this, what is the stuff that you'd be like jazzed to talk about? Like this is behind the paywall. Like none of those freeloaders could hear this. Like only the people paying for the good shit. So what is the kind of thing that would be like, you'd be pumped to say, to talk about? But
oh
um
man.
like I'm looking at this thing right now. I'm sort of like teeing you up a little bit to talk about this, but like I'm hopefully you'll just allow me to read this and not have a problem with it. But I'm looking at this drawing you did of like this guy who's like a firefighter, And
Uh-huh.
then you have this like thing here where it says like an interesting cultural artifact of 21st century global warming was the reorganization of firefighting companies into powerful political entities. Now I just think that's like a genius idea right there. Like I get like
I do have something. So if you this yeah, people can see this is on my website. Like this
yeah,
whole
I mean it's
Inktober
there for
2020. The, if you read from day one till the end, you can see me getting radicalized a little bit. You can see where me uh, I don't want to get
so
too
was this
political
was
because
October
this is a comics
2020?
podcast. This is October of 2020.
No,
I
I mean,
was
you know, listen, the
yeah.
more controversial it is, the more likely this is to be like successful. So, you
I
know,
mean, I'm not too. I'm somewhat open about my political views online. I mean, it's like if you can people can probably tell if you follow me enough.
for
But
sure.
yeah, I think during this thing specifically was when I kind of came to the realization, like, oh, it's not. We don't need extra technological gadgets to fix the whole climate change pollution problem. Society just needs to be reorganized.
Right.
Well, at this point, I mean, I climate collapse is like an inevitability, but to stave off the worst of it and keep people from dying, the economic system under which we live under which we
Sounds like a
live
bunch
need to
of
be
commie,
changed.
socialist, Marxist talk to me.
It's a little bit of that, yeah.
All right,
So
all right.
yeah, you picked a good one. I mean, this was kind of still early on in my I'm being a little coy here, political development, but this is I things started to change for me. I think I went
Well,
into
yeah, I mean,
this,
this is
yeah,
you know, I mean, this is Inktober 2020, right?
yeah. This is
So
Inktober. Like my first
so
entry
I'm
is like
just
a dude. It's like a dude with like solar panels on his back,
right.
and it's like,
I'm just
oh,
trying to give
we
people
just
a
need
picture like
gadgets.
I'm just trying to give people a picture of this is like October 2020. Like it was
Yeah,
a very chaotic and political time. I mean, it still is, but like
yeah. I
this is
mean,
the height of the pandemic. This is, you know, I guess the election hadn't happened yet,
the
right? The
election is
election is
coming. Yeah, I think for where I am in October 2020, it's like I was still an engineer and I had a full-time job, but it was all remote at this point. I went in once every 2 weeks,
oh, we
and
haven't even
but
talked about
most
that. I didn't even know like you were like an engineer. You are an engineer. I didn't even
yes,
realize that.
so yeah, we can hit that real quick.
I don't want to
I
like, you know,
no,
if
no,
there's
no,
limited time, I don't
I
want
can
to.
summarize it quickly. I went to school for engineering. I was an engineer for 3 years. I didn't
Oh,
like the job,
wow.
and then as kind of a result of like I always drew all the time. As a kind of a result of the pandemic, I was drawing way more because my job was kind of a joke. And I
What do
was
you mean?
home.
You're just like at home, like
It was the company I worked for was like they really didn't have a ton of work for me to do. It's not like I wasn't cool to the point where I was trying to not work. Like I was actually pretty like I'm going to be a good employee. They just literally didn't have that much work for me to do, and I was home alone, so I was drawing like all day.
hmm.
And I ended up getting a lot of art jobs that way. And then by like 2021, they were telling us to come back in the office, and I had an hour long commute, and and my wife had finished school and was working,
Yeah. And this is
had a better
still
job than
like
me already.
I don't know how hardcore you are about COVID or whatever, but this is now like
Oh yeah, this was
2021. Come back to the office, like fuck
yeah,
you, like
yeah. It was annoying. It was more like like the cases were down where I was, but it was like I had an hour long commute, and they had demonstrated for 2 years. Like I'm talking end of 2021. Literally, I quit like like be like at Christmas break of 2021. So the pandemic was, well, depending on who you ask, winding down. In the States, people were not
right,
taking it seriously anymore.
right.
Um, and it was more like, you've demonstrated I could work from home for like 2 years, and you guys have
So
made
why do you
record
need me to come
profits.
back
Yeah.
now?
Why do I have to drive an hour to sit at
Yes.
a computer?
Such a
Um,
bizarre thing. It's like this mental thing that like people who own these companies have where it's like, well, they're not working if they're at home. Like it's like
oh, it
the,
was
you
like, yeah, it was
know, it's
full
like,
on. It was like a control thing. It was awful.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's yes. I used to be an engineer. I may go back to it. I've considered it. we'll see. That's probably beyond the scope of this
That's a
podcast.
whole aspect of your work, though. Like, that complete. I had no idea about that. So that
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
opens
some
up
people
like a
know,
new
some people
way.
don't. Yeah, I do have like
Now
a
everybody
STEM.
knows.
Now everybody knows.
No,
I
I'm
do have
just
a
kidding.
STEM background. It's not a secret. I don't care. I just like don't talk about it a ton.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But any yeah, so October 2020 is like I'm sitting at home. My wife is like in school and then also working extra shifts at like the job she was at then. She was in a healthcare setting. So it was like this was during the pandemic. She was having a horrible time and I'm just kind of sitting here home alone all day.
Hmm.
And that's when
She's
I'm
in.
drawing all
Did you
this
say
stuff
she's in
and it was
healthcare?
oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like fucking like on the front lines of this stuff. This is
Yeah,
like
she's
October 2020. Like this is like
yeah, she's amazing, and so yeah, these drawings were coming from kind of a dark place, and I'm not always a pessimist, but I kind of learned. I don't know. I definitely changed a lot of my outlooks on things over the course of definitely over the course of the pandemic, but specifically over 1 month in 2020. A lot of things
yeah,
changed
no,
for
I
me.
mean that's like a and by the way, I was wrong earlier. I'm also tempted to call this podcast by the way, because I realize I say it way too much now. But I was wrong before. The election is in November. So it
Yeah, it
was
was in November, so
October.
this was right
Yeah.
before then. Yes.
Yeah. Leading
Yeah.
up to crazy election. But
Many things were
that
happening.
was stolen. No, I'm kidding. Not
Yeah.
stolen. Joke. 100% joke. Nobody
100%
get
a
mad
joke.
at me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that idea that you have like a STEM background, that really like puts things into context for me. That kind of like it's like I was
All right.
saying before,
Don't take
kind
it
of
too seriously. I went to school for engineering. I did not. It was not a great engineering school, and I did not have a very serious engineering job. I have a little bit of a STEM background.
okay, interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. I'm really,
To
I don't
to any prospective employers listening, I actually am very smart, and you should hire me. But to regular people, don't take me too seriously.
allegedly Logan is very smart.
Yeah.
Allegedly, you should hire him is the way I would put it, just to cover ourselves legally. But
Yeah. Legally, yes.
I haven't seen any evidence that you don't have donkey brains, so I can't really say for sure that you don't have donkey brains. But yeah, I mean that I don't know. I know you're saying you're downplaying it a little bit, but like for instance, I'm looking at like day 31 of the Inktober thing, and you've got a guy who's like in an astronaut suit, and there's like robot arms attached. I'm just saying, like it like puts things a little bit more like you have like an interest in science more that I didn't realize. I guess that to the point where you got a degree, in it. But
Yeah, I am to this day. Like I didn't have a great experience working as an engineer, but it is interesting to me. It's one of those things where like if I had the time and the money, I would like build things. Like it would be cool. Part of why I quit my job was I didn't get to do stuff like that. But yeah, it definitely comes into my art. Like
have you seen
I will read stuff before I draw stuff often. Like if I'm doing mechanical stuff. Yeah,
oh, interesting, to sort of like you know
I'll do some
familiarize yourself.
research. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Have you watched at all like the Adam Savage has like a YouTube channel where it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about a little bit, because it's like he'll be making, he'll make like a prop from like a movie from like Alien or something, but it like has like it's like this fusion of like engineering STEM background, because he's like actually physically making the thing, on like a lathe,
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
there's been a lot of his videos, like for instance I was mentioning the Blade Runner blimp. He has a video where he made like the Blade Runner blimp like with his assistant, like uh I guess it probably was like 1/3 size. Like the actual real one is fucking huge. It's not the size of an actual blimp, but it's like a fucking massive model that they used for filming. His is
Yeah.
probably like, it could fit on his nightstand or whatever, but it's like this fusion of like he's using engineering and building skills, but it's like used in like it's almost like sculpture or something. It's used in like an artistic sense. He's like
Oh, that's
making
so
art.
cool.
He's not making like an oil rig, but it's
Mhm.
using the same skills that you would use to like make like an industrial thing or whatever.
Yeah, depending on what I'm drawing, I do try to like I do a lot of fantasy stuff, and I'm not going to say my stuff is rigorously scientific, but I think about how things would work. You know, it's it's a there's a little bit of it still comes through in the stuff I draw, and I wish there was like, you know, I wish there were like they had machine shops like they have libraries where I could just go in and check some stuff out, but they don't. So, so
Yeah,
that's
no,
where I
I
am.
hear you.
That's where I am STEM wise.
You could just check out like a
Like
lathe or
a
whatever.
lathe, yeah.
Pretty much the only tool term I know is just like lathe. I'm just saying lathe
Lathe
over and
and
over again.
knee mill, 3D printer. I got to do 3D printing work at one of my jobs. I liked that. When I was in college, I got to do some milling and stuff, and I liked that. Like the hands. I didn't get to do enough of it, and it sucked. So
I
yeah,
could see like
but
doing
yeah,
like
that
3D
was a little bit of a
printing.
tangent.
Oh yeah, here I could see doing like 3D printing of like a Logan Stahl, like some of your artwork. Like I could see like that would fit very well with like I'm looking at a picture of like autonomous reef repair submersible. I could see that just being like something on your desk as like a 3D printed thing.
Yeah, if I could go back to my old job and get all the factory line fixtures that I designed, they could all be Logan Stahl originals, and I could sell them.
Huh.
These little blocks that are meant to hold motors. Yeah, it would be cool to do something more artistic with it, but yeah, it's like the buying a 3D printer is the part that is the
Yeah.
tricky part,
Plus you need what the filament, I guess.
and the filament adds up too. Yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to keep you forever, man. So I'll let you go. Like where people can find you like Lil Tachyon on X. I hate saying X so
I hate
much.
just call it Twitter. People know what you mean. I
Lil
think
underscore Tachyon.
yeah, that might be the exact handle.
Yes.
I think if you Google my name now, like I think if you Google Logan Stahl art, most of my website and most of my socials come up. The there's like slight variations on my handle on a couple different websites, but if you search Tachyon or Logan Stahl, it'll come up. And yeah, you can find me. I post to most places, and if you don't have social media, I have a website, and I do an email where every month where people can see what I drew and they never have to log into social media ever. So
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
would recommend, sign up for his like his email listing thing. I would recommend just looking at his website. I mean, as we've been doing the pod, I've just been looking through some stuff. I mean, he has a section here called ruminations where just like there's plenty of great stuff in there. Like he goes into detail about talking about like how you draw like Moebius, and it's really very insightful stuff here. I mean, I'm not an artist, so a lot of it is like not meant for me. But I mean, if you're a young artist and you're looking for information, like he's got some of it at least, it's very, I don't know. I found it to be very insightful and smart. But
Actually, that yeah that also in that section on my website there is a link to. I have interviewed a bunch of other
yeah,
artists
interviews with
like
other artists. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Alejandro
what it's called.
Bruzzese, Guy Pradell, really,
Yeah,
great people.
very cool people. So if you want to find other artists, that's one way to do it. Is there's some really cool people that have been really nice and let me email back and forth with them and do interviews. So yeah,
All right. Thanks so much, Logan. I hope we could
yeah.
talk
Thank you
again
for
soon.
having me on. This was a blast, and you have a great night.
You too.